And so, what were kind of some of your favorite parts of being there? So, like, was it just being steeped in another culture? Was it getting to go somewhere you didn't think you'd ever get to go? Kind of what was the highlights of it while you were there?
Well, traveling to some of the other countries around there, that was interesting, like to the Ivory Coast and the Dakar and Senegal and Liberia. Some of that was somewhat interesting. That wasn't really necessarily the favorite part. I think the favorite or the I didn't go over there thinking it'd be the favorite part because I didn't even know it would exist. But what I remember the most from being there is the times where several of the Peace Corps volunteers were together, and it wasn't anything planned. It was just we just happened to be in the same area and decided we would stay in the same village together, and some of the discussions that would take place. Most of them, a lot of them was around political discussions and discussions on how to solve some of the issues in the third world country and sharing things that we had seen there. For example, I told you my Lebanese friend ran the little shop, so to speak, in Jerhin, which was close by. And he would sell rice out of bags, and the bags would read "Gift from the United States of America." But what happens is we send that food over there to help the country, but there is such corruption in their government that that government takes it and sells it and makes money on it, and then the people they sell it to makes money on it. Well, it's been sold two or three times before it gets to the vendor in the village that is selling it again to the villagers to and makes money on it. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of what we call the junks, which we would think of as sort of a yard sale with clothes. We called them the junks, going to the junks to get some kind of a pair of jeans or jib shorts or whatever. And those were clothes that was given um, to like Goodwill, United Way, different organizations, Salvation Army, and again was given to the country and sold and sold and sold and sold and finally got to the individual that sold it to you in the village. So one thing that I mean we talked about that a lot is how when we got to the States that we would never give money to an organization unless we knew exactly where it was going, that it was going to get to that organization. And quite honestly, the only ones that we saw when we were over there that went directly to where it was supposed to be and not to the president was um, anything that went through the Catholic Charities organizations. They went directly to the priest, and the priest and the sisters made sure they got to the who they belonged to. And then there was a order of sisters over there. One of them in particular had been in that country 60 years. They were also from Ireland. And um, I volunteered with this lady quite a bit. And one of the things she had was a leopard village. Anybody that had leprosy was sent to this village, and they treated them in that one village. So that was interesting to see that. And then I worked in a village to where we were building some latrines, trying to. It was hard to get them to not go to the bush and use the bathroom. And then the rain season came. There was two seasons there, dry season and rain season. The dry season, it would be 130 degrees in the shade, but it wasn't like it was a moist hot, if that made sense. It didn't feel that hot, and your skin didn't dry up that much. It was sort of a steam heat, I guess, is the best way to
Like
put
really
it.
humid or something?
Yeah, it wasn't real bad. It was about 70% humidity. But then there would the coldest it would ever get would be like maybe 85 degrees. but 85 degrees, once your body got acclimated to it, there was 1 or 2 days I remember being there and it being that cold, and you were wrapping up, and so you were trying to find stuff to wrap up and you were freezing to death. And that was like 85 degrees. So coming back to the States in December in New York, that was really a adjustment to make
It was a major shock.
after being over there.
Shoot.
But yeah, that that was hard to get used to too, actually, that heat and no air conditioning and that stuff, and living. But you acclimated to it pretty quickly. I lost my train of thought. I can't remember what I was going to say when I was saying that. But yeah, that was hard. The things though that you thought you would miss, you did not miss at all. You would think you would miss the bathrooms. That really wasn't that big of a deal. You thought you would miss electricity, running water. Those things you really didn't miss that much at all. The interesting thing that all of us, all the Peace Corps volunteers that I knew, some of them would always eat at McDonald's. I never really ate that much at McDonald's before I went over there, but for some reason you would crave McDonald's. And I don't know that I ever even had a Big Mac ever, because if I ate there, it wasn't a Big Mac. But I mean, that's kind of what you thought you were first thing you were gonna do when you got back to the States is go to McDonald's for a Big Mac. I'm like, I don't even know what that tastes like, but
The ultra American.
that was a crazy thing. And the only candy that could be sent over there that didn't melt immediately was peanut M&Ms. So if anybody mailed you peanut M&Ms, that was like, you would share it with all the others because everybody would have craved peanut M&Ms. So that was a big deal. But I think what I was getting at is like when the rain season came and they used the woods to go to the bathroom, and then that washed it down into the river where they would go get their water. That's what kept the dysentery just going crazy all the time.
Gotcha.
So one of our big things when I was there, especially in my village, was trying to build latrines where you could contain that, and they would go use the bathroom in the latrine rather than in the bush, and building water wells where you could get clean water and not, and it was hard enough to get them built with native material, but it was even harder to get them to buy into it and use it. So you had to go about that by going through your village elders and get their buy-in to where they could get their village people to buy in. And the hardest thing was, they had such respect for their elders that, they thought, well, grandma's always gone to the river and got water. Why should we? They didn't trust getting water out of a water well. They'd rather go to the river, which may have been 2 miles away, and carry the water on top of their heads back to the village. So it sounds like it would have been an easy thing to get them to buy into, but it was not.
Yeah,
And
a lot of people wouldn't really understand that, is that's how that's been done there, for years and years and years. And now suddenly you're introducing a new way. A lot of people would be suspicious, well, we see it nowadays, people are ultra suspicious of things they're not used to doing.
So that was hard. And even my village was an easy village because it was, like I said, close to the highway and somewhat more exposed than other villages. But the villages back in the bush where we went to build some latrines, or we built, I think, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 latrines back there. That village, the only way to get to it is to, we would have to load the motorbike, a little motor scooter, Honda is what the mode of transportation we used. we'd have to put that in a dugout canoe out of a log and cross the river, um, and then get back on it and go. I mean, it was it was a rough ride, and the uh, parts of it you were just basically riding through swamp, gutter type places to get there because there wasn't really a road. So to get a village like that to buy into something like a water well or latrines or whatever, it was a massive undertaking just getting concrete and equipment back there for them to build the latrines. I can't even imagine trying to get the culverts and stuff back there that you need to build a water well. But that's what you faced a lot of. And even the village where I was at, which was close to a highway, close to the second largest town, or yeah, a big town in that country, it was still a hard sell to them, even to use it. But we ended up building 3 water wells in my village, and probably a total of 12 latrines throughout the village. And by the time I left there, they were using it, and so that was good. That now, once that Civil War started, I'm sure that's what I first thought. I thought, I bet that stuff's blown sky high, because that's one of the areas where they went through there. And there's several books that I've read since then of people and that's told about some of the things that have happened in those villages where they just scattered. And I can't even imagine, because the village where I was in, there were probably maybe 4 or 5 people at the most that had been within a mile radius away from that village. They'd been there all their lives. That's the only thing they knew. So the village where I was telling you that we built, that we had to cross the river to get there, there was another way to that village on another side. It was a pretty long drive that that we used that way to get some of the materials there for the latrines. And the first time we pulled up with that zinc pan and stuff to use to build those latrines, some of those villagers started running because they'd never seen an automobile before. So, I mean, that was like huge for them.
That's amazing. And you think, I mean, how could, it's just things that people probably would never imagine, you don't think about people not having ever seen a car, I couldn't imagine anyone in the United States really who hadn't at least seen a car.
Even in my village, we would get Newsweek. That's one of the things that the Peace Corps provided us. And sometimes I would get packages from home and stuff with a magazine or something in it. And the villagers, they'd pick it up and look at it, and it would be upside down. I mean, they didn't even know what they were looking at. It would be like something like us going to Mars with something.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how crazy it was. And I took a game over there called, I think it was Simon Says, maybe is the name of it. And basically had 4 different colors, and it played this rhythm, and then you had to tap it and repeat the rhythm. And I mean, they loved that game because I mean, that was just like a spaceship to them. Seeing that. But yeah.
And were the Peace Corps welcome in the villages? Did they usually get met with like some kind of like, we're glad you're here, or was there animosity?
Not in the country not in Sierra Leone. I didn't know of anybody that wasn't welcomed with open arms in their villages. A lot of it had to do with the village chief. I had a village chief that had he was 96 years old, which was a really old age at the time. But if you can get their stamp of approval, then everybody else's follows along. I mean, it's so. And that's the way it was in most villages. This one, he had, I think, 26 wives, and I don't even know how many kids. A lot of kids, and a wife was like, he was a wealthy man in that country because you had to pay for the wives, And the reason you had that, you would want that many, well, I guess there's a lot of reasons you'd want more than one wife, but the big reason there is the wives are the ones that did all the farming. They're
Mm.
the ones that worked in the rice fields, and they did most of it actually. And you know, the more wives they had, the bigger crops and the more they could grow and harvest and that kind of thing. Uh so yeah, he had 26 wives. And there was always a head wife, and the head wife was the boss of all the other wives. And then there was a favorite wife, and that would be the one, and that one would change at different times. So I guess when he got tired of his favorite, he would get a new favorite, and that's kind of the way that culture worked
Hmm.
over there.
And so, what was it like being a woman in, that environment? I can't imagine that that didn't impact your stay or your experience at least a little bit.
They thought it wasn't just being a woman, but if you had blonde hair, it was being a blonde white female. They could not imagine you leaving your country and your family to come to their country to try to help them. So you had immediate um, prestige and honor because of that. Um, I didn't really have to, I didn't ever get into where I had to bulk somebody. Some volunteers did, especially some of the nurses that would go in a village and would try to, for example, stop them from force feeding a child. They were really bad about that, feeding the child cereal way sooner than they should have, and they would actually kill a lot of the babies because they would choke on it and also and they would force feed that out of their hands. So some of them got, in hot water sometimes in a village because they were uh, trying to make some changes. But with what I was doing, I didn't really experience any of that. And I had one of my best friends was one of the priests, and he was in and out of the village a lot, and so they had respect for him. Even though most of my village were Muslim, they still had a lot of respect for uh, the priest because he's the one that ran the most. All the schools there when I was there were run by the Catholic organization. So they wanted their kids to get educated, so they were. Uh, I didn't have any of those kind of problems, you know, with that. Really none. I'm trying to think of some other things that we did. Um, we had a track team we organized and took them to other parts of the country to run meets. I mean, there were some just natural athletes in that culture. They're just and the music, the rhythm and stuff. Just it was just born into them. They just had the abundance of that. They would have a party that would go on 3 days straight. When they had a dance or a celebration or something, you could count on it going on 24/7 for about 3 days.
That's amazing.
I mean, that's how, and they would go in and out, and it was crazy. And when we were all in that training village, they had it seemed like one a week or one every 2 weeks anyway, where it was just like we thought we were all big partiers and stuff. And we're like, geez, I don't know where they get.
This is a lot of energy. I don't think I can match.
But, but anyway, yeah, that there were a lot of different cultural things there that I would see in the United States, especially after I came back. Because once I came back, I went from there into coaching and recruited a lot of African American athletes and stuff. And you would just see, I would notice a lot of similarities from the two cultures that had never been seen each other before. I mean, it just had to be something within their bloodline, that they were that those things were natural to them, that I'd seen over there, and I would also see it in the United States.
Gotcha. And so, do you ever think about going back? Is that something that you ever thought you might do later on in life?
I have thought that I would go back to that country. When I was lived in Owensboro at one of the masses that I was at, there was one of the sisters there that lived in Sierra Leone, or had lived in Sierra Leone. It was during when the Civil War was going on, and they moved everybody out, and they have just began to let Peace Corps volunteers back into that country. And so after Mass, I was able to talk to her and tell her that, hey, I lived there once and all that kind of thing. And I said, I'd really like to go back there at some point. And she said, well, you need to wait. It would be very heartbreaking, because she hadn't even gotten to go back herself. But she said, just from what I saw before I left there, before they got them all out of that country, she said they had just destroyed everything. So she said,
Man.
take your time before. So I don't know if I will or not. It depends on what the climate is in the United States, I guess. But yeah, I'd love to see what happened to the country and some of the places where I used to be a lot, hang out a lot, uh, for sure.
Gotcha. And so, would you recommend Peace Corps to anyone nowadays? Would you recommend somebody try it out? As you know, there's a lot of different groups that are similar to Peace Corps that people can be involved in. Would you recommend getting involved in one of those organizations?
Well, it's up to the individual. I think to survive in Peace Corps, you have to be. It's not easy, and not everybody can live in those conditions and survive. Uh, so if you're going to go to a third world country in another country on another continent, then you need to know what you're getting into. I'm not sure I did at the time, and I'm not sure I would have gone necessarily, but what probably helped me as much as anything was being raised on a farm and being able to, oftentimes you had to take nothing and make something out of it in order to solve an issue you were having with whatever it was you were doing. So being able to implement and use what you had available to you to fix something, that probably came in as useful to me in the Peace Corps as anything. Um, I've had people ask me, prima donnas, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
that was raised in very wealthy families, and talk about it, and I've told them, you just need to know what you're getting into, because it's going to be as far different than what you're used to, and you've got to, if you can't survive, then you can't. There's no use of going.
Yeah.
They might be able to do the work, but it's you don't just have to do the work. You have to be able to survive while you're there. And you've got probably the biggest thing. I thought I was going to go over there. All of us did, thinking we were going to save the world. And what we found out is what takes maybe 3 steps in the United States took 300 over there. And we weren't, what we went over there to do is a drop in the bucket. We learned much more from them than we were ever able to teach them. So, we came out of there thinking, I'm not sure who benefited the most out of this deal.
Yeah.
But the reason I say it is the cheapest and the best foreign relations that the United States have is you're on the ground working with the people. You're living with them, you're experiencing what they need and trying to help them solve their problems that they had right then and there. And at the same time, you were you were doing that, you were doing it for almost nothing. You got a little living allowance that wasn't much.
Mhm.
And when we were over there, Reagan was had just been elected, and we figured out in one of these meetings we had with our, not really meeting, but get-togethers, we figured out that the entire Peace Corps budget would have run the Department of Defense 45 minutes. Our year's budget would have only run the Department of Defense 45 minutes. So so that's why I'm saying it's the cheapest foreign relations and probably the best. Oftentimes where we weren't, maybe sometimes people were skeptical, is cabinet members or the ministries or the government of that country sometimes um, thought that Peace Corps volunteers was just a cover for the CIA, that we were all working for the CIA. So sometimes you had that thing you had to get past. Some of the volunteers did. Wasn't too bad in our country, but in a lot of countries that was a big issue.
That's
So
interesting.
so that was, a hurdle sometimes you had to jump. Uh, Luckily, we didn't have to deal with that. So, but we lived on the beach. We could get to the beach uh, pretty quickly too, and it was um, there was no one on the beach. You had it to yourself. So
That's
that was
amazing.
that was good.
Little things, the little things, and I'm sure
Yeah.
that lets you appreciate the little things.
Uh huh. Uh huh. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Peace Corps is definitely an organization I encourage everyone to check out. As Susan said, it may not be for everyone, but it definitely sounds like you'll gain so much experience and some life changing opportunities and things like that. So, thank you, Susan. And so, remember, tune in every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. to check out another FYE Talks episode and stay tuned for all of our future episodes. Thank you.